Good morning.
Hello. How are you?
Good. How are you? Good morning,
Good.
everyone. Are we waiting on one more person? I
think
see.
we have everyone.
Okay. Great. I see your team name. If you don't mind editing and adding your name, that would be helpful with my scoring. You should be able to edit when you click on your name there. Thank you. All right. I am ready when you all are. Good luck to you all.
Thank you. I'm Madeline Deep. I'm first speaker for Henry Clay. So if everyone's ready, I can go ahead and start. All right, awesome. We affirm resolved increased United States federal regulation of cryptocurrency transactions and or assets will produce more benefits than harms. Our first contention is tax regulation. Currently, insufficient and confusing regulation of cryptocurrency creates tax loopholes, costing the US billions in tax dollars. Although cryptocurrency is loosely regulated by many agencies, the IRS is the body in charge of taxing cryptocurrency and states that crypto is treated as property and general tax principles applicable to property transactions apply to transactions using virtual currency. Pazanzi 21 explains that it is extremely complicated to figure out which parts are ordinary income versus capital gains, as well as when the associated tax income has accrued. They conclude that organizing the tax treatment of all these assets, and then, of course, ensuring tax payment, is essential. Crypto regulations, like the one found in Biden's infrastructure bill, close tax loopholes and make paying taxes on cryptocurrency assets significantly easier. HAR 21 discusses how, under the law included in the infrastructure bill, companies that facilitate crypto trades would be required to report tax information about those trades to the IRS, just as brokers of traditional investments like stocks do, starting in the 2024 tax season. Adams 21 furthers that if properly regulated, the tax loophole through the use of wash sale would close. HAR continues that the infrastructure bill regulation would crack down on cryptocurrency tax evasion. People within the cryptocurrency industry, like Shahan Chandraska, an accountant with CoinTracker, believe that regulations of this sort are generally investor-friendly because it makes crypto tax compliance easier for investors. There are two impacts of instituting tax regulations like the one in the bill. First, it enables spending on essential infrastructure. Kelly 21 reports that the cryptocurrency tax requires brokers to report trader information on transactions of more than $10,000 to the IRS. She furthers that it would offset $28 billion of infrastructure costs over the next decade. This $28 billion in increased revenue will go to care infrastructure like universal childcare and improving decrepit physical infrastructure, producing numerous benefits from early childhood education and safer infrastructure. Second, tax regulation validates cryptocurrency. Alcorn 13 contends that legitimizing crypto by defining it in the law and recognizing stakeholders, as well as regulating crypto marketplaces and businesses to protect government and public interests, will enable innovation and development in the financial sector. Furthermore, Smith 21 explains that resolving some of the tax and reporting ambiguity around crypto would go a long way to increasing business confidence. The second contention is environment. Regulating cryptocurrency reduces emissions. In the status quo, cryptocurrency is a major source of emissions. Miller 21 explains that over the past 2 years, the historic rise of Bitcoin has caused emissions to increase by over 40 million tons, the equivalent to 8.9 million cars. He summarizes that no other human activity has a higher carbon footprint per dollar invested, and that other cryptocurrencies are only slightly better. Q121 finds that one potential regulation that would make cryptocurrency mining more eco-friendly is to encourage mining in regions that already have underutilized energy sources like solar or hydroelectric. Gettler 21 states that by the US increasing regulation around the Bitcoin miners who are using so much power, they would reap rewards from an environmental standpoint. The impact of this is mitigating climate change. Herring 21 explains how we can slow the rate and limit the amount of global warming by reducing human emissions of heat trapping gases, which are produced as crypto miners use massive amounts of energy. And that the more we overshoot emissions targets, the more serious and devastating the negative impacts will be. According to NASA, these impacts include increased heat as well as drought and insect outbreaks, which the World Health Organization quantifies will lead to an additional 250,000 deaths and a loss of $2 to $4 billion annually. For these reasons and more, we affirm.
Alrighty. Hello, Judge. I'm Ida Chapman. I'm the first speaker for the Davidson Academy team and the con side. Judge ready, opponents ready, and partner ready? All right. Okay. My time will start now. As economic systems across the world have continued to develop, a new form of currency and investments has begun to flourish. Currently, cryptocurrency is becoming more and more prevalent and is both interfering with and benefiting all sorts of industries, from legal industries to illegal industries. Cryptocurrency, or crypto, is a digital asset that is somewhat of a combination between an investment and a currency. It uses a technology called blockchain to run semi-autonomously, and instead of being run by a central entity such as the government or an organization, it is decentralized and monitored by many people all at once. This means that it isn't regulated in the same way as stocks or other currencies are regulated, which some may argue is a bad thing, but it actually is fine. Not only would regulating crypto be infeasible, but also has the potential to challenge and harm this influential industry. Resolved, increased United States federal regulation of cryptocurrency transactions and/or assets will produce more benefits than harms. My partner and I negate this resolution for the following two reasons. One, regulating cryptocurrency would be ineffective, and two, regulating crypto is detrimental to the industry and the economic system at large. Judge, my partner and I are defining regulations as the regulations that the federal government is most likely to introduce, which in this case is regulations both requiring more reports on taxes to the IRS regarding crypto and regulations on stablecoins. Impact brought up by our opponents on other forms of regulation should therefore not qualify as much because they simply have a lower probability of occurring. Contention 1. Regulating cryptocurrency is inherently infeasible and therefore would be ineffective. As Pazzani's 21 reports, quote, there are thousands of different cryptocurrencies but no consensus on the precise number. The range is between 5,000 and 12,000, valued at about $2 trillion, unquote. If we can't even decide how many cryptocurrencies there are, how can the government be expected to regulate all of them? Inevitably, some of them will fall through the cracks. This isn't even the most complicated part. As the source continues, quote, those numbers sound huge, but there are actually many, many more than that because lots of crypto products are not currencies and lots of cryptocurrencies are too small to be part of mainstream exchanges, unquote. The numbers of cryptocurrencies are increasing all of the time and they're super easy to create. This means that regulating crypto is simply a nightmare. What counts as crypto? What doesn't? Even worse, the US government doesn't adequately understand regulation of cryptocurrency, which makes them ineffective regulators of this industry. According to NYU, the main way the government could regulate crypto is by taxing fiat money cashed into currencies. Proponents of this resolution argue that this would curb the ability of people to commit tax fraud, but this couldn't be further from the truth. In actuality, there are too many cryptocurrencies for the government to tax the fiat money cashed into all of them, which means that despite the government's best efforts, it still would be frighteningly easy to commit tax fraud with crypto. The impact of this is that our opponent's case doesn't have any impacts. Regulating crypto wouldn't be effective and wouldn't solve any of the problems that our opponents are positing that it would solve. Therefore, we should win this debate on that account alone. Contention 2. Regulating crypto is harmful and the status quo is effective. The center of crypto as it stands is deregulation. Howell 21 writes, quote, in an embryonic market like cryptocurrency exchanges, industry self-regulation might be an optimal first option. Those aware of the intricacies are best placed to draw up codes of conduct and form alliances of exchanges adhering to specific codes. Good alliances are best placed to monitor the ethical behavior of their members and use refusal to admit or ejection from the group as checks against less ethical traders, unquote. Levy and Lipton 21 write, quote, two of the world's most popular cryptocurrency exchanges announced on Sunday that they would curb a type of high-risk trading that has been blamed in part for sharp fluctuations in the value of Bitcoin and the casino-like atmosphere and such problems globally, unquote. Because crypto is such a new industry self-regulation is the best option currently. And also, the industry self-regulation is actively fixing problems and decreasing volatility of the industry. Crypto is already best regulated by those who are inside of the industry rather than looking on the outside and potentially viewing it as something that it isn't. If Washington insiders who know nothing about crypto are in charge of regulating it, we can expect a fiscal fiasco. The impact of this is decreased investor security and decreased investor involvement, which could cause the the collapse of this industry that is already worth several $trillion and could potentially lead to a wider financial collapse. Regulating cryptocurrency not only wouldn't work, but also would cause excessive harms for both the industry and the economy itself. Those who would be regulating cryptocurrency do not have the resources or insider know-how that current regulators have. Thus, the status quo is effective, and changing things wouldn't help at best and would be catastrophic at worst, and thus we negate. Thank you.
All right, are we ready for first cross?
Yes, as the first speaker, would you like to ask the first question?
Yes, and I will start my time now. Looking specifically at your second contention, you mentioned that you state that crypto self-regulation is decreasing volatility. Can you explain how this decreases volatility? What evidence we have of decreased volatility?
Yeah, so we cited the Livian-Lipton card, which said that two of the world's two cryptocurrency exchanges are curbing a type of trading that was blamed for high fluctuations in value of Bitcoin, and so therefore it's increasing the volatility because it's making it less likely that these sharp fluctuations in the value of Bitcoin would occur. May I have a question?
Of course.
Alrighty. So you state in your second contention about the environment that if the U.S. increased regulations, it would help the environment. Do you have any evidence showing that it's likely that the U.S. will increase that regulations on the environment are more likely than regulations on other aspects of cryptocurrency? Do you regulations on? Do you have any proof that regulations on Bitcoin mining are extremely likely?
It's hard to quantify exactly how likely certain regulation is in any sense of the word. So we can't guarantee that there's going to be regulations in financial sectors. We can't guarantee that there's going to be regulation in environmental sectors either. What we're really arguing for is whether these regulations would be beneficial. That's what the resolution is asking. You know, United States federal regulation of cryptocurrency transactions or assets will produce more benefits than harm. We're not arguing whether it's likely. We're arguing whether it would produce benefit and harm. So what we're saying is, we can't quantify how likely it is, but there would be a huge impact if it was implemented. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Looking at your first contention about being ineffective, you mentioned that there's too many cryptos to tax, so it would be easier to commit fraud. How, under a world with tax regulation, even on a few cryptocurrencies, would it be easier to commit fraud on all cryptocurrencies? That just is nonsensical to me.
Yeah, so we mentioned the NYU card, showing that even if the government did crack down on tax fraud and it did increase regulations taxing fiat currency, like the types of regulations you mentioned in your first contention, even if the government did this, then criminals could still tax fiat money in on other currencies that were not regulated, because there are thousands of currencies and the government can't pay attention to transactions happening on all of them. That's simply infeasible. So therefore, the criminals could simply move to other cryptocurrencies and cash in money on those cryptocurrencies that are unregulated, and therefore the impacts of tax regulation actually wouldn't occur.
So just to follow that up, so you're saying if half of crypto is regulated through tax and half of crypto isn't regulated with tax regulations, those half of cryptos that are regulated, you'd still see a decrease in fraud there, yes?
Well, the fraud there could simply move to the unregulated ones. So though it will decrease the fraud on some cryptocurrencies, the fraud will just move to others, and the overall fraud will be about the same.
Okay, thank you.
That's cross. Thank you.
Hi, I'm so sorry. This browser completely got lost. And my other browser's open. I will take 2 minutes of prep time. Actually, I'll take a minute and a half. And I will start that timer right now. Hey, I'm so sorry. I accidentally set a timer for an hour. How much prep have I used?
I believe you've used all of the minute and a half.
Awesome. Okay. I will get started then. Let me pull up my timer. Okay. And just for a brief off-time roadmap, I'm just going to be going over their case, and then if I have time, I will talk a little bit about our case. And I will start my time right now. Okay, so first off, my opponents talk in their contention 1 about how we need to look at regulations that are most likely to be implemented. And to look at our contention 1, we're talking about the regulations that are being implemented as we speak and how those increasing regulations are going to have a net positive benefit, like our $28 billion of increased tax revenue. My opponents say that that's not likely to happen, not going to come to fruition because there's like tens of thousands of little crypto coins or little crypto currencies that are like not necessarily being accounted for because we don't know that they all exist. But because the vast majority of money in the crypto market is found within just a few cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum, we're going to see that those which are known and well known by the federal government are going to be taxed, and we're going to see all those benefits that come in our contention 1 from an increased taxation of those markets. Also, some regulation is better than none, and my opponent's arguing that just because it's not likely to like completely be able to regulate all cryptocurrencies, it just doesn't make sense. If we can regulate a few of them and we can regulate them well, which so far is what the United States is doing by using investor-friendly regulation tactics, like again, we talk about in our contention 1, we're going to see tons of benefits come from regulation, and it's just a starting point where we could see even more regulation in the future, leading to even a larger host of benefits. Along with their point about only certain regulations being likely, in our contention 2, we want to see that like we could pressure the government to even further regulate stuff for the environment and those regulations, as climate change becomes an even more a larger issue in our day-to-day life, we could definitely see those regulations happen because it's pretty easy bait for the government to regulate cryptocurrency with the environment in mind. Okay, moving on to their contention 2. Everyone agrees that transparency and clarity is what's best for the crypto world and the economy in general, which is what regulations provide, specifically tax regulations. We can turn, because unlike what my opponents say that regulation is detrimental to the industry, regulation is good for the industry. It provides predictability and transparency, which helps individuals choose which currency to use. Sawyer 21 writes that when Congress increases regulation on crypto, investors, digital asset exchanges, smart technologies, government officials, regulators, and everyone in between will benefit from a more mature marketplace that protects its consumers and values transparency, predictability, and honest communication. We're going to see regulation that helps people understand the crypto market and helps them make better choices, more well-informed choices, and helps the government be able to tax all of this money that's moving hands from the crypto market. I don't know if my opponents just don't want us to tax crypto and want to let people get away scotch-free without any sort of regulation, but the whole idea of crypto regulating itself, well, you're not going to see crypto all of a sudden taxing itself. We need regulations to increase tax clarity, which will increase revenue, which is one of our largest and most important impacts because of all the beneficial things it does for the American populace. On top of that, very rarely have industries regulating themselves been the best option. If you just look at, if we had let all sorts of industries like, I don't know, coal or anything like that regulate themselves, we never would have seen any progress or anything beneficial for our country. So we need regulation from the outside because the industries will just do what's entirely best for them, which is not necessarily best for their consumers. Now, quickly moving on to our contention 2, which is about the environment. The U.S. is now the top destination for Bitcoin miners, and all of those emissions are under the United States' realm now that are coming from China to the U.S. because of crypto mining being banned there. So we need to regulate cryptocurrency for the environment in the United States because of the massive impact that the United States now has on global climate change because of the increase in Bitcoin being mined here. So for those reasons and more, I stand in firm affirmation.
Okay, we're going to take about a minute of prep, but first, may we have your Sawyer 21 card?
I'll put that in the chat.
Thanks. And then we'll just start prep time when we get that so we can review it briefly. Okay, my minute of prep time will start as soon as I set my timer and mute my mic. Okay, I ended up using 50 seconds of prep. I'm going to get my timer started. And Judge, just as a brief off-time roadmap, I'm going to go through their contention 2, our contention 2, their contention 1, our contention 1. So Judge, first of all, their second contention about emissions isn't really telling the whole story. They say that we can regulate emissions and get emissions to go down, but the harm of this could be investors moving other places or even the mining moving other places. There's no incentive to stop crypto mining. And if crypto mining is more expensive with renewable energy, it incentivizes people to move to other countries. Look at China where there were tight regulations. People move. That shows that the miners aren't afraid of moving. Moving on to our contention 2. We talk a lot about how difficult it is for cryptocurrency to be adequately regulated. And their response to that is basically that, well, yeah, but if we regulate the major ones, then we're fine. But the reality of this is it's really short-sighted. Cryptocurrencies won't always stay the same. So what we're doing is we're playing regulatory whack-a-mole, which is not effective. They continually talk about tax regulations, and I'll add that tax regulations are important, of course. People should be paying taxes, but there are existing regulations in place for that. So their main point here has to do with clarity. Clarity does not have to be achieved with increased regulations, and increased regulations have been shown to cause harm. Even regulations cracking down on money laundering have dropped the price of cryptocurrency in the past. So this shows that increased regulation isn't generally received well, at least by the market. So that should not be the most important factor here. Moving on to tax loopholes. They talk a lot about tax loopholes, but they don't really talk about how you're going to solve it because you're not. What they're proposing, again, is just increasing the transparency, the clarity of the regulation. The harm of this is that people invest in crypto because of privacy. Crypto is one of the very few investment opportunities where you don't have the government poking in your business constantly. And yes, you can still report your capital gains tax. So they're not proposing like a new tax on that sort of thing. But what happens when we do have to add reporting, like in the Build Back Better plan, is it leaves the potential for investors not wanting to have the government in all of their investments again. So what that could mean is decreased privacy for investors. What that means is that people will move from crypto because that increased privacy of cryptocurrency that we have currently is what they continue to like. Moving on to this self-regulation point. They talk about how coal couldn't have been self-regulated, and we don't disagree. But the reality is crypto is very different from something we were dealing with hundreds of years ago. And what is best for the crypto market is best for investors. Investors want to make money. The cryptocurrency market wants to make money. So their interests are aligned here. I'll also add that there is a financial incentive to be adequately regulated. Look at Bitcoin. Some of the more major cryptocurrencies are already putting regulations in place, and some of the more major exchanges are as well, because that lends to their credibility. When they do it, it's encouraged financially. So as such, it shows that self-regulation here has worked in the past and continues to work. Obviously, self-regulation isn't perfect, and their impact here, their only impact in their case, is that maybe it could be a little bit clearer. our impact is potential investor flight. Our impact is potential crypto price drops, which we've shown through our Living Lipton card and our UPenn card as well. So I think when it comes to weighing impacts here, it's very clear the con ballot is the correct choice. We continually talk about capital flight and all these things, but at the end of the day, really what we're weighing is potential increased transparency at the risk of investor flight, at the risk of miners moving elsewhere, and at the risk of really harming the market as a whole, because crypto is connected to stocks and bonds. So even if you aren't invested in crypto, this could still have a huge impact on your portfolio or your grandparents' retirement portfolio. So when it comes down to the impacts here, we clearly outweigh in terms of magnitude because we're showing how this could impact the market in a much broader way. We also outweigh in terms of solvency because we've shown that their environmental point has no solvency, and as such, any of their impacts related to that don't apply. And we've shown that tax does not have any real solvency either. So their $28 billion has no impact, and they have not actually proven that that will happen. Thus, we continue to negate. Thank you. Are you ready for cross?
Yes, and I will take first question if you are ready.
Sure.
Okay, so on your response to our contention too about people, miners moving away from the United States and using China as an example, how can China be a adequate example of crypto flight or to other countries if they outright banned crypto and we're just talking about some environmental regulations?
So we're talking about the capability of moving, right? So we've shown that in China, crypto was able to move. So that shows that it's possible. Also, the environmental point is if it costs miners an arm and a leg to mine in the US because you require sustainable energy or because of any number of reasons that you might require, then it incentivizes them to move somewhere where it's cheaper, which could be even worse because the country where they move might have even less environmental regulations. And our point there was also solvency because you haven't really shown that it's likely to happen. I think you said it's hard to quantify and then we can't quantify. So that's the point there. Do you mind if I have a question?
Yes. Go ahead.
So you talk a lot about transparency. Do you think that that necessarily has to mean increased regulation? Can we be clear without adding more regulation?
I think right now, especially looking at taxation, without more regulation, then it's just not going to be clear because right now there's so many different cryptocurrency, because of its novelty, they've tried to apply several different taxation principles to cryptocurrency that have been formally applied to stocks. And because that's not tailored to cryptocurrency, like you yourself and your partner said, Washington at first maybe doesn't know exactly what they're doing, but as we've seen an increase in the prominence of cryptocurrency, we're seeing a greater understanding of cryptocurrency, and an increased regulation, especially in the taxation, would really lead to more clarity and transparency because they're taking the regulations that had formerly been applied, the ones that maybe weren't super clear, and they're making it more clear by adding new and increasing the regulations to that part of the crypto market.
Okay, so quick follow-up. Would you want an increase in taxes, or you're basically just wanting more regulation that clarifies the existing laws?
I mean, it's kind of both, So right now, because the regulations are so unclear, because they had just not been tailored to cryptocurrency, we're seeing that taxes are not being paid. So I guess you could say that there would be an increase in taxes, but not necessarily because they're raising taxes on people, but more so just because they're increasing the clarity so people know how to pay their taxes on crypto. Okay, can I have a question now?
Sure.
So you all talk a lot about how this self-regulation is going to enable cryptocurrency to get back in line and do all these beneficial things. But where is the proof that I know that there's that example of Bitcoin and Ethereum in the past, but where's the proof that it's going to happen in the future? I see that the United States is actively trying to regulate cryptocurrency, but where's the self-regulation proof?
Judge, do you mind if I answer even if we go a little bit over time? Okay, so as I mentioned in my rebuttal speech, it's a lot of financial incentive because obviously we can't really 100% accurately depict the future. So what we're looking at is what the market has a financial incentive to do. And they have a financial incentive to be transparent with investors and to have some of those guidelines in place. So that's our point, is if you have a financial incentive and you want to make money, then you'll probably follow where the financial incentive is.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, I will take a minute of prep time before my summary, and I will start that time now. All right, that was a minute. Emily, can you mute yourself on our call, please? Thank you. All right. For a brief off-time roadmap, I will be addressing my opponent's side of the flow, first their first contention, then their second contention, and then I will move on to the affirmative side of the flow, our first contention, our second contention, and look at impacting and weighing in the end. And I will start my time on my first word. On my opponent's first contention, self-regulation is not going to increase clarity around taxes, regardless if it has been working in the past. What we need is increased transparency on taxes to link in the impacts we described in case. Investor-friendly regulations like the ones we proposed in the Biden's infrastructure bill will not see flight from crypto, as Jahan Chandraska, an accountant with CoinTracker, believes that regulations of this sort are investor-friendly because it makes crypto tax compliance easier. We've seen issues in the past with companies like Ripple who have threatened to leave the US over legal problems because it was unclear what the US wanted as far as regulation from crypto. So obviously we need a little bit of increased transparency here, and the self-regulation hasn't worked. They also don't provide for how much tax fraud will still exist. There's no quantification there. Then looking at my opponent's second contention, ultimately we have to look at precedent regarding transparency regarding crypto, as well as the point of offshoring that my opponent brings up. Again, look at the Ripple incident. Large crypto trading company threatened to leave the US because there was legal problems regarding regulatory ambiguity. Obviously, in a legal sense, self-regulation is not being effective. And yes, the point that crypto is still changing and volatile, therefore making regulations difficult, is valid. Regulations are not going to be easy. Nothing is when you're in a very free market country trying to regulate the economy for the benefit of investors. Established cryptos so far have stayed established. So we have to look at how volatile is this market going to be when we're regarding large corporations, especially knowing that we can watch market trends. Ultimately, regulations are investor friendly, making it better for the crypto industry. Then on to our first contention regarding tax regulations. This won't increase privacy. As we mentioned, it's only reporting for $10,000 transactions and over, which isn't the large majority of crypto transactions. When we're looking at privacy, there's not going to be a huge effect as far as tax reporting. And we won't see flight again because it's investor friendly, and investors want transparency to help make better decisions and protect their money. And we do provide solvency. Look at our link into $28 billion from increased tax revenue from Bitcoin and not Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies. Then on to our second contention. Of course, there's no guarantee that regulations on the environment are going to happen, just like there's no guarantee that regulations on anything are going to happen. We're just looking at what's needed most. And then bringing up China, as my opponent did, is not a valid argument because China outright banned crypto trading and crypto mining. That is not the same as making regulations towards using environmentally friendly mining options like already existing green energy. It's just not the same. And then you have to look at the fact that overall, one main problem has been offshoring, and that crypto regulation has not led to offshoring because when a country imposes a new restriction, we don't see crypto traders fleeing that jurisdiction for more permissive countries, except for the instance of China, because China banned crypto. Impacts we win on live saves from protecting the environment. And then Bitcoin, as my partner mentioned, could increase temperature by 2 degrees, and then we outweigh on tax regulations preventing tax evasion and providing infrastructure money.
Alrighty, I'm going to use about a minute of prep time, which my time will start as soon as I mute my mic. Okay, that is my minute of prep time. Judge, as a brief soft time roadmap, I'm going to go over our opponent's case and our case somewhat in conjunction with each other, and then I will go over I will weigh impacts then afterwards. Judge ready, opponents ready, and partner ready. Alrighty. My time will start now. So first of all, our opponent's point on self-regulation not increasing clarity on taxes, are their response to our first contention. That wasn't the argument we were making. We're not saying that self-regulation will increase clarity on taxes. We're saying that their regulations will not increase clarity on taxes. So the impact there isn't mutually exclusive to their case because their impact isn't going to occur. It has no solvency. We have shown with our NYU card that regulation on taxes is ineffective because taxing fiat money cashed in will simply incentivize criminals to move to other forms of cryptocurrency and cash in fiat money there. They have not refuted this point here, so therefore it still stands. So therefore their point about tax regulation doesn't have the impacts that they're saying that it will have, because criminals will simply move to other currencies and that are unregulated, and crime will still continue to happen in the same amount. They mentioned that there won't be investor flight, and they actually mentioned the example of Ripple, which, however, the example of Ripple shouldn't qualify in this situation because Ripple actually moved overseas because of regulations, and though they make the point that these regulations were excessive and unclear compared to the ones they're suggesting, this is actually they have no proof that the regulations that they're proposing will not be interpreted as excessive and unclear as the public. We mentioned our UPenn card and our NYU card, in which it proves that regulations cut down on crypto crime, then the prices of crypto have dropped in the past. So therefore, this does show that prices can drop and that investors do feel affected by these regulations. So therefore, their point here isn't actually true. Regulation does actually cause harms for the crypto industry, which is unlike what they're positing. Also, they state that there's yes, there's no guarantee that environment regulations will happen, but and they state, well, no, there's no guarantee that other regulations will happen. That's true. I suppose there is no guarantee. However, we have Congress has actually been talking about regulating tax fraud. Congress has actually been talking about regulating ransomware and other forms of these are the regulations we've been discussing in other contentions are regulations the government's actually talking about. The government, they have provided no source saying that the government is actually talking about regulating the environment. And also then and also, even if it was regulating, then it could it would still be detrimental, because mining could simply move to other countries because it will be cheaper to regulate, because using renewable energy like they're discussing is quite expensive. So therefore, their case does not have solvency. We've proven harms with our case. Their case does not have impacts, and and ours shows that their case, if implemented, would have harmful impacts. Therefore, you should negate. Thank you. Alrighty, are you ready for Grand Cross?
I am.
Alrighty, as the first speakers, would you like to ask the first question?
Okay, I will start my time. I'll start cross time on my first word. Looking at what you brought up in your first rebuttal regarding Bitcoin self-regulations, could you describe how Bitcoin self-regulations has been effective in the past?
Yeah, so we give the example of the Livy and Lipton card that you reference, that we gave it in our constructive speech where regulations affecting the past. In addition, we also gave our Howell card in the constructive speech where it says that since crypto is such a new industry, self-regulation is an optimal first option, simply because and we mentioned that in our constructive speech. So
yeah, that says that regulations have worked, but we haven't actually seen that. We have seen an increasingly volatile market, harms to investors without this level of clarity and regulation. So it doesn't look to me like self-regulations are the best choice here, and there's nothing really provided that goes against that.
Well,
So there's been nothing in your case that's mentioned how federal regulations would do volatility. So I don't really think that we can argue that at this point, because, well, we have 2 minutes to respond to it. But I do want to just comment on the idea that it hasn't worked in the past. Markets are going to go up and down regardless of how effectively they're regulated. So I don't really think that we can attribute this to regulations. I would say, though, that when we look at curbing high-risk trading, which the platforms did on their own, things like that certainly decrease volatility. So even if it's still not perfect, it's better than it was. Do you mind if we take a question?
Of course.
So you talk a lot about this environmental point. Could it potentially be more expensive to use renewable energy to power Bitcoin mining, or any crypto for that matter?
Potentially. But what we do talk about in our case is moving crypto mining to places that have accessible and widespread renewable energy use. Like, think Arizona and the amount of sunlight it gets. They're using solar is way cheaper than using any other sort of electricity. I mean, we've seen this kind of talk about how renewables are quickly becoming cheaper than fossil fuels. And by regulating cryptocurrency for the environment, you could see crypto being moved to places where renewable energy is readily available. So I don't necessarily see increased prices and cost being inherent to that kind of regulation.
Okay.
would you like a question?
Yes, that's what I was going to say. Specifically regarding your point on offshoring, I mean, other than China, are there any instances of any crackdown on mining specifically causing offshoring?
So we don't have other examples of that specifically, but we do have examples of invest, and I mean, you guys did give the example of the Ripple the Ripple company moving overseas because of in response to regulations. So that also could qualify as an example of offshoring as well, though it's not offshoring with individual investors. That's cross. Thank you.
Okay, I will take our remaining 30 seconds of prep time, and I will start that right now. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. For a brief off-time roadmap, I will just go over what the points that we went on, and then kind of what the judge should be weighing on today. First, I'm going to make a quick point about Ripple, and then I will talk about weighing and that kind of stuff. Okay. I will start my time right now. Okay, Ripple went overseas because of a legal battle over the regulations that me and my partner are trying to replace by increasing regulations on cryptocurrency, the increased clarity, which is actually something that I'm weighing on. So today, Judge, we went on clarity because of our contention on taxation still stands. Investors want to see this regulation because it increases tax clarity. Look at Ripple, my opponent's only example of companies going overseas. They left because of the regulations that we're trying to replace with increased regulation. And we're going to see benefits from that because we won't see flight from investors because also there's no precedent of that, like my opponents admitted during cross. And we won't see decreased privacy because the government still really values that. And that's not inherent to taxing cryptocurrency. And we're also going to see $28 billion in revenue. My opponents say that we're not going to have any solvency. We don't necessarily need full solvency of the issue of taxation, but we just need this increase in revenue because that's greater than any sort of impact that my opponents have proved because of the clear benefits that has to the American populace through early education and other essential infrastructure that'll keep Americans safe. We see that we'll have clear results for this taxation that is crafted by the U.S. government. So we're going to see clear benefits from that. Also on the issue of climate, just because we haven't necessarily seen tons of talks about the climate regulation or environmental regulation in Congress yet, doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Because of the newness in the influx of all of these companies from China to the United States, we're just seeing an increase in emissions now, and we'll see those talks in the future. Bitcoin as a whole could increase emissions by 2%. That are not increase emissions, could increase the global temperature by 2%. That is a massive increase that we do not want to see because of how many lives that could kill each year. $250,000 lives each year, billions of dollars that we're going to see. And we could just regulate that like me and my partner suggested during cross, which would be extremely beneficial. So we went on those two reasons. My opponents just bring up some like things for investors, but that does not count in considering how many lives are going to be lost.
Okay, I believe we have 1 minute and 10 seconds remaining, if I'm not mistaken. We will go ahead and use that as soon as I mute my mic. Okay, that's our 1 minute and 10 seconds. Let me just get my timer set up for 2 minutes. So, Judge, I'm going to go through the 5 major issues of this debate, being tax evasion, volatility, environment, privacy, and investor flight. My time will start now. So, Judge, first of all, on their tax evasion point, they say that they don't have full solvency. They admit that. But what they do continue to assert is that it will, quote, save lives and be beneficial. As we've shown, increasing regulations decreases the price of cryptocurrency, which actually harms the market. So that should not be weighed for them. That, in fact, should be weighed for us. Also, they're not proposing more taxes. They're proposing increased compliance. You can get clarity without regulations, which would be far more effective because you don't have those harms that we've already discussed about regulations. Second, they never respond to our point on volatility and how that increases. So that should absolutely be flowed for the con side. And as such, we should win on that point. And that should also win us on their tax evasion point. Third, they talk a lot about the environment and regulating crypto in the environment. They tell you renewable energy is cheap. It's not cheap. Even in Nevada, where I live, you can't necessarily just use sun all the time. There's still cloudy days. And even if you can, it is still expensive to install solar panels. So they kind of neglect this. Furthermore, their whole point is to get people to move to where it's, quote, cheaper. This in and of itself is an inconvenience for Bitcoin miners. If you live in Seattle and can't potentially do that, then it puts you at a disadvantage. So first of all, it's inequitable. Second of all, it's not feasible. And third of all, it could potentially incentivize these bigger miners to move overseas where it is both cheaper and there are less regulations. They continually talk about Ripple. The exact quote is, Ripple is considering leaving the US and opting for Asia or Europe instead because of unfavorable regulatory climate and excessive federal government regulations. So when we continue to try to add on to regulations, that's the definition of increasing the excessiveness. As such, their Ripple point should actually be flown for us because it shows how excessive regulations are dangerous. They talk about privacy. They never really respond to our point that investors invest in crypto because they want privacy. As such, if the government tries to infringe on this by mandating even more reporting, which would be the way to get these tax gains, that could lead to this investor fear. Thus, we continue to outweigh in terms of magnitude, we continue to outweigh in terms of money and in terms of lives. So as such, they're way overstating their impacts with lives here, but their 28 billion will not happen if the market crashes. And as we've shown, that is more probable with our in their world. Thus, we continue to negate and believe the only reasonable decision is a con ballot. Thank you. Great debate, you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, good job. Good luck in future rounds.
You too.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Ronnie. Great work, both sides. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.